Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ideas for Tomorrow.
Hello and good evening. We can learn a lot from today's guest. Mellody Hobson rose from a difficult childhood to become a highly successful investment strategist and philanthropist. She's known for her intelligence, candor, and compassion. Her personal story is truly inspiring. She has much to say about the value of money management, the benefits of perseverance, and a lifelong learning, and the importance of diversity. Here's a video to tell you more.
Patience and steady growth are the guiding principles for nationally recognized financial literacy expert Mellody Hobson. Determined to take the mystery out of money and remove the barriers to success, she has made it her mission to help others find a way to financial health and well-being. The youngest of 6 children, Mellody Hobson was raised in Chicago by a single mother who struggled to pay the bills. Growing up in a household where evictions and lack of money were ever present, Hobson vowed to learn how to make good financial decisions. Excelling academically, she attended Princeton University, then joined Ariel Investments. Over the course of her 31-year career, she rose from intern to the top of the Chicago-based money management firm, where she is co-CEO and president.
Mellody Hobson is an icon in her own rights, a trendsetter, a glass ceiling breaker.
Named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, she is a formidable force in corporate America, serving on the boards of J.P. Morgan Chase & Company and Starbucks Corporation. A fierce champion of financial literacy, Hobson is committed to sharing her knowledge to empower others. The Ariel Education Initiative advances educational opportunities in underserved communities. It backs the Ariel Community Academies program to educate children and families to help break the cycle of poverty. She is also the chair of After School Matters, a nonprofit organization that provides life-changing after-school and summer program opportunities to more than 20,000 Chicago high school teens each year. Reaching out to a wider audience, Hobson has been a regular contributor for CBS News and travels the country, sharing her experience and expertise. Recognizing the social aspects that influence finance, Mellody Hobson has been pivotal in making a difference. In her 2014 TED Talk, she introduced color bravery, encouraging people to have conversations about race with honesty and understanding. She is also an advocate of diversity in corporate America. Recently, the Hobson-Lucas Family Foundation made the lead gift to her alma mater, Princeton, to create Hobson College, replacing Wilson College. It will be the first residential college at the Ivy League school named for a Black woman. Earlier this year, she was named to Chicago's COVID-19 Recovery Task Force to help guide the city's economic recovery from the coronavirus. Breaking barriers and beating the odds, Mellody Hobson inspires others to overcome adversity. She sees her power of purpose and sets her ambitions beyond professional achievement, teaching future generations how to financially thrive and create their own path to success.
Welcome, Mellody, and thank you very, very much for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Our pleasure. I really love your life story. It's truly, truly inspirational, but what I love mostly are your childhood photos. You look very, very cute when you're little. Can you tell us a little bit about how your childhood kind of inspired your life path and it affected your career? So the youngest of 6.
I have to tell you a funny story. So that baby picture that you have of me, I think I'm 6 or 7 months old. It's the only one we have, because when you're the youngest of 6, they stop taking baby pictures. So literally, I have no baby picture at birth, and that's it. The next picture, I'm like 3 years old. And that basically sums up my growing up. My mom was a working mom. She was a single mom. I'm really young in my family. So my siblings are a couple decades older. And so basically I have four sisters and a brother. My brother passed away, but I grew up with five mothers. And I really came to the investment industry in, I think, the most honest way, which was as a result of how I grew up. I was desperate to understand money, desperate, not to make it, not to have it, to understand it. I thought if I understood it, I would be in good shape. And so it's no accident I work in the investment business, because that goal of understanding money is what basically drove and led me to where I am today.
But what is interesting from your life story, I understand that you were very self-sufficient. You had very many supportive siblings, but you managed kind of to find your own high school, to determine which courses. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I have a friend Pat Ryan Jr. in Chicago. And since we were very, very young, we always said to each other, how old were you when you knew you were a mutant? I was 5. I knew I was a different kind of child when I was 5 years old. And my family just wasn't as focused on the things that I was focused on around school and the like. And the first person in my family, immediate family, to go to college and graduate from college. And so as a result of that, I just had this very, very unique focus, ambition that I can't really explain, but it existed. So I was literally a kid. This is a true story. I found my own orthodontist when I was in 5th grade. I went to the orthodontist. I did my own consultation with the orthodontist, and because I had this mangled mouth of teeth. And the orthodontist said, "Where is your mother?" And I said, "She's not here." And he told me how much it would cost. And I said, "Well, we don't have that kind of money." And the orthodontist, the $2,500 for the braces, he gave me a payment plan. I was in 5th grade. And there are lots of stories I could tell. My school bus got into a car accident when I was in 2nd grade. I got off the bus and walked to school, and they didn't know where I was, and I was already there. So this efficiency really came out of having a busy mom, which in many ways was a real gift because it made me very independent.
Did you ever think growing up, being in a 5th grade, that you would ever attend Princeton?
Yes.
Yes. How was that? Was that an early career goal? The first career goal?
No one in my family knows where I got these ideas, but I used to say as a very small child I was going to Yale. My family does not know where I heard about Yale, how I thought about it, why I picked Yale. So basically for most of my young life, I said I'm going to Yale, until I went to visit Yale as a senior. And when I walked on the campus, no offense, Yale, I started crying. And I looked at my mom and I said, "I'm not going to Yale." It's just a strange thing. I don't know. And when I got to Princeton, I loved it. We took a train to visit the schools up and down the East Coast. And I can't describe why I knew, but I was focused on that at a very young age.
Yeah. So what attracted you to Princeton? I mean, Princeton is such a great school. We spoke a little bit about it, and you obviously have a passion for the school. There is a gift in your honor. There's going to be a college built in your honor. But tell us a little bit about Princeton. Why is it so special, and how was it for a young woman, your background, to attend Princeton?
Well, first of all, when I received the Woodrow Wilson Award, I said I had a deadpan line that I did on purpose, where I said, I came to Princeton, first person in my family to graduate from college, etc. And when I landed on campus, I felt like I belonged. And everyone thinks that I'm going to say something different. I loved Princeton from the moment I got there. My path to Princeton is a really funny story. I'll tell it very quickly, where, as this high-performing high school student, I had my sights set on an Ivy League school. And I got into Harvard and I got into Princeton, and I was going to go to Harvard until I went to a Princeton dinner for new students and met an alum named Richard Missner. When I told him I was going to Harvard, he said, "Tomorrow you can't go to school in the morning. You need to come with me." Believe it or not, my Black mother from Chicago let me go to this breakfast with this man that I'd never met before. And he took me to meet Bill Bradley. And I walked into a room with only 6 or 7 business people and me. And it changed my life. And this was a mother who was very committed to me going to Harvard. And her joke was, "Harvard is like Coca-Cola. You could go to any country in the world. You could be in an African village and say Harvard, and people know what you're talking about. And Princeton is like Sprite. We only know it in America. But despite her Coca-Cola Sprite comment, I ultimately went to Princeton for the education and the focus on undergraduates. Harvard would have been a great school for me too. And obviously these are high class problems, but I ended up exactly where I should have been.
Yeah. But in, having this wonderful time in Princeton School that you loved and continue to love, then there was your first career choice. And obviously graduating from Princeton, being an exceptional student, I'm sure they have very many opportunities to choose from. How did you end up in Ariel Investments? And that turned out to be the first and the only place that you've ever worked at. And
yes, I had one job. I'm the only person in my graduating class who's had the same work phone number since I graduated from Princeton 29 years ago. The only person out of 1,100 people. So obviously, it stuck. I think it has a lot to do also with the insecurity I felt as a child, that I like security and I don't like a lot of change in that way. I'm good with certain kinds of change, but for some reason, the idea of moving really bothers me. And then having the stability at work was really important to me. And I came to work at Ariel as a summer intern between my sophomore and junior year. And then I went and worked at T. Rowe Price one summer, and I came back to the firm. And so I discovered the firm very, very early. I did go and interview on Wall Street. And one day, just in the middle of writing my senior thesis, sitting in the bowels of the Woodrow Wilson School in my Carroll, I just went up to the payphone and I called John Rogers, who founded Ariel. And I said, I'm coming to Ariel. And he said, what changed your mind, or what made you come to us and not continue your Wall Street interviews? And I said, because I can learn from you and I'll sit right at the power. And so I can't have that anywhere else. And I think you'll be a great teacher. And he ended up being the best teacher.
Well, that's obviously one part of the success of any successful person is to be surrounded by a great and nurturing environment. So speaking about a great and nurturing environment, Ariel Investments certainly turned out to be one for you, and now you are leading it yourself. But this is the first minority-owned investment firm in the country.
Correct.
And when you take a look at what you have been able to accomplish in the Ariel Investment, and Ariel Investment has been able to accomplish so much, but still today only 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women, and only a handful of those are minorities. What is your perspective on corporate diversity? I know you get asked this question a lot, and obviously what is interesting for all of us is to learn from you about your perspectives on how organizations should address the fact that we have an underrepresented leadership when it comes to women, minorities. Tell us a little bit more about that, the topic that you're passionate about.
So first and foremost, I just start off with the fact, yes, you're right. Ariel was the first minority-owned investment firm ever started back in 1983. I didn't start the firm. My co-CEO, John Rogers, started it, having had a love of the stock market since he was 12 years old. And we're highly, highly unusual in so many ways. We are not all Black, and yet I think our diversity is our competitive advantage. It's one of them, and it's a very important one because we get the best and brightest. They see a story like mine. She was an intern and she became co-CEO. So you can imagine that we get some of the best resumes of African-American and Latinx students who want to work in the financial services industry. You can't be what you can't see. And so since they see my story and see me at the top, those who are ambitious say to themselves, maybe there's a place for me. And because of that, we've been able to attract a great team. When I think about the broader story in corporate America, because I've been so brought up on this idea of inclusion and diversity from the first day I worked at Ariel, John told me, you're going to be in rooms with people who make a lot of money and who have big titles, but it doesn't mean they have better ideas. I want to hear your ideas. That is the definition of inclusion, saying, I will include you in this conversation, which is such a powerful gift to give to someone who's 22 years old. When I look at corporate America, what I see is a lot of talk. And instead of lip service, I'd like to see more elbow grease. I happen to be married to George Lucas. I joke I married Yoda's dad. And Yoda says, do or do not, there is no try. But in corporate America, there's a lot of try around diversity. And it's the only area of anything that we work on where you can work on it and still keep your job. Versus if you miss earnings, you lose your job. If you miss that product launch date, you lose your job. Something that corporate America says is mission critical. We've not seen meaningful change. And yes, people keep running the same playbook. And so I think this is a consequential moment for corporate America. I've been calling this Civil Rights 3.0, 1.0, Emancipation Proclamation, 2.0, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. Both of those were government. This time, this problem is at the feet of corporate America, and we are going to have to respond. We can no longer admire this problem.
No, I couldn't agree more. But when we speak about a diversity and inclusion, I think it is a very nice definition of inclusion is that you just mentioned is that people are including you because they want to hear about your ideas. But there's also another part of diversity and inclusion effort in corporate America that you also framed in a way that I found very interesting. You have advocated for being a color brave and not for being a color blind. What do you mean by that?
I did a TED Talk back in 2014. It seems like a lifetime ago. The sad thing is the subject is incredibly relevant today. And it was on race. And it was really attacking this idea, or maybe I should say attacking is too strong a word, turning it on its ear, this idea of being colorblind. Because I'd met so many people, well-meaning, lovely, who constantly told me they were colorblind. Often they were white. And I would say to myself, you're colorblind, and yet you do not see the absence of diversity around you. So maybe we should change our perspective. And instead of not seeing color, and therefore not seeing that it is missing in your life, we should be color brave and actually look to see color and invite people in our lives who don't look like us, who don't think like us, who don't act like us, and who don't come from where we come from, and thereby create a more diverse environment. It's something that comes naturally to the financial services industry because we talk about diversification, portfolio diversification. In nutrition, we talk about a diverse diet. You can't just live on dessert. And yet, when it comes to this idea of diversity in our daily lives, we have some notion of what it is, but we don't live it. And so the idea of being color brave was to say, I'm actually going to see and think about ethnicity in a very different way. And I'd like corporate America to do that in a very thoughtful way, not just talking about it, but by doing something very, very simple, which is counting. I always like to say math has no opinion. And so we talk at the Black Corporate Directors Conference about the 3 Ps, and starting with counting when it comes to people by ethnicity. No multicultural umbrella where everyone gets wrapped up together as women and people of color, because in doing so, you miss the underrepresentation. So starting there from the top of the organization, the board, all the way down, you get to see by being intentionally looking for diversity, intentionally being color brave, that you ultimately can shore up the numbers where you're falling short.
But the really important part is, so I think there are 2 parts of this big responsibility that we share in our society about introducing the diversity and inclusion. One is obviously our corporate responsibility. People who lead large organizations have to lead from the top. But the other is also, so to say, a societal responsibility to instill in every child an appetite to climb the ladder, to climb, in this case, corporate ladder, and prepare them for the success in a corporate world. So you spoke a little bit about the need that the stock market should become a regular topic in a dinner table conversation of every family, every African-American family. Is that your response or a suggestion to the families, African-Americans, minority families, regional families, to start to work on a financial literacy for their youngest ones from the early age so they can be actually prepared for their careers?
Before I answer that question, I want to actually go back to one thing that you said, which is the idea of having a young person who can focus and climb the ladder. Yes, but there needs to be a job and opportunity for them. And that is something I think is very important. People talk about the pipeline, they talk about young people and having opportunity. But if they don't have real opportunity inside those organizations because of subconscious bias or because of a lack of consideration around making sure the environment is inclusive, it's all for naught. And so, people can put the pressure on the individual. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we are all we've got, but we have to create an environment in which they can succeed. And when I think about my own story and my own life, obviously miracles happen for me. The universe conspired in ways I never could have imagined to create opportunities for me that exceeded every expectation I ever had, and hopefully will continue to do so. But your life shouldn't have to be a miracle in this country to just have a decent life. And that's the one thing I just want to make sure to underscore. When I think about the stock market, we really are talking about the fact that we need to create economic equality in this country. And one way that that happens is through equity. Earned income is just that. Equity is how you create wealth. And that is as old as that, as any story, it is just known. And yet we've done a lot of work to show African Americans are underinvested when it comes to the stock market and investing. And that's everything from our 401k plans at work, which ultimately means our retirement livelihood, to just basic investing. And so we've tried to create a financial literacy effort with the Ariel Community Academy to socialize young Black students to the idea of saving and investing and the notions of the market at a very young ages in order to change the trajectory for them and ultimately their families.
Yeah, but I'm so glad that you're mentioning that, because what we're seeing now during this pandemic is that financial literacy not just important for the future of an individual's life, but it's also important for the maintenance of health. The financial strains on our society during this pandemic have been unprecedented, and what we're seeing in healthcare is that very many people in our communities are suffering, not just because of the exposure to illness, but a compound effect of a lack of resources, and on top of it, the significant challenges that the pandemic has introduced to us. So
I'm so happy you said that, if I could just cut you off for 1 minute.
Yeah.
Because I say to people all the time that worrying about money is debilitating. And it really does wear on you, both emotionally, psychologically, and physically as well. And I think about that a lot as it relates to my family, my mother, how hard she worked, as well as my young years where I worried and fretted so much and had so much anxiety over where we'd live and if we'd have a phone and if our lights would be disconnected and the like. I look at my 7-year-old today and I think of how much freedom she has, that her brain doesn't get spent worrying about food and shelter. And that is something that I don't take lightly when I think about what we need to do in our society to make sure we create more economic opportunities for people, because it literally shaves years off their lives, as you know all too well.
Yeah, no, that is unfortunate and absolutely true. I think it is our shared responsibility to give every person, every citizen of this country, a solid foundation for life and prosperity. But if you were to think a little bit about the practical advice in the first steps for people who are exhibiting interest in financial literacy, what would be some Mellody Hobson's rules for money management, like A, B, and C?
Well, I have quite a few of them. I'll give you some that work for me, especially early on. So first and foremost, I tell people save your raise. So, as you move up in whatever job you have, it might be an hourly worker, it might be someone in the highest ranks of corporate America. We just like the old principle that nature abhors a vacuum, so does a bank account. Whatever you make, you'll spend. So if you can make some kind of commitment to save a little bit of what your raise is, it creates, again, a habit forming situation. And habits are powerful things, as you know, but ultimately creates that economic opportunity over the long term. And little amounts add up. So that's number one. Number two, I feel very strongly about making sure you are actually invested. And so, so many people miss out on basic investment opportunities at work with something as small as not contributing enough to getting the free money. Make sure you're investing enough to get the corporate match.
And for those who are worried about the stock market or worried about the volatility, I always give them some simple math. If you work at a company and they match 50 cents on the dollar for the first whatever, that's a 50% return. You can't get that investing. So don't walk away from that 50% return, or if it's 25 cents on the dollar, that 25% return, because that is powerful math over time. And the last thing I would say, yes, I'm very disappointed about our society. We are financially illiterate in America because we don't learn about saving and investing in school in this country. You can take woodshop or auto in a high school in America today and not take a class in investing, which always leads me to ask audiences the same question. Who whittles in their spare time? Who cleans their own carburetor? No one. But that class on the stock market, on knowing the difference between the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the S&P, those things could be life-changing. And so since we are not getting those things in school, demanding it of your kids or your nieces and nephews or your godchildren's schools, pushing for that kind of financial literacy, asking the local stockbroker, the local financial advisor, the local person at the bank to go and teach kids about investing, that can be done. But then also understanding you are all you've got, and taking some responsibility and understanding no one's going to do this for you. And it could be as simple as just reading the business pages, just read the middle of the paper and just start to get used to the terms and the language, getting yourself a financial advisor. And when you get a financial advisor, making sure they explain to you what they're doing. You're a foremost hospital in the world, and you know that you want an informed patient. And if my little girl broke her leg and someone said she broke her tibia in 3 places, I'd say, what does that mean if I did not know that was her leg? So these things are super, super important. And we need to have that same kind of dogged pursuit of knowledge and information when it comes to investing with those with whom we hire to help us.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that these advices will be well received by our audience, because I think you're very, very sound. But I would just like to ask you now a little bit on a different scale. So from a personal finance literacy, so let's move up to kind of a macroeconomics here. What do you think, just from your perspective, as all of us are looking at the economy in the United States and in the world, what do you think that these long-term economic effects of the COVID pandemic are going to look like? The market has performed better than many people assumed during the pandemic. Do you think that this is going to persist? What is your take on it?
So I'm old school in my knowledge and studying of the stock market. And my knowledge is based upon the greats like John Templeton and Warren Buffett, Graham and Dodd. And they talk about the fact that the market anticipates the future. Why is the stock market hitting new highs? Because it's anticipating a post-COVID economy. It's suggesting that post-COVID economy will have a V-shaped recovery. That's what it's telegraphing. I think it is suggesting that the pent-up demand that will exist will ultimately lead to a more robust economic recovery than we think. Now, this is all based upon what we're seeing in terms of the performance right now. And I do believe that is true. That doesn't mean there won't be hiccups along the way. Nothing goes straight up, nothing. And so we can expect volatility both in the market and in the economy. But in general, I think that we have the makings of a sound recovery, largely driven by the summer stimulus bill. And that puts more pressure on Congress right now for this next bill, which is mission critical. The things that are sunsetting at this end of the year will lead people to a desperate situation and a hole that will become impossible to dig out of. I think what the market is telling us is they think Congress will be thoughtful about this and get it done. So at the end of the day, I'm optimistic. That doesn't mean there isn't tremendous pain and suffering going on in this country right now, which literally has me with my own versions of sleepless nights, because I know things are very bad for a lot of people. But I'm very hopeful that if we get the right foundation under us, particularly this next stimulus bill, and Congress acting rationally in the new year, that we can actually do better than expected. We saw that coming out of the financial crisis. And interestingly, I went back and reread a lot of work around the Great Depression, which was horrific. And the reason it was as bad as it was is because a lot of the foundation we have today did not exist then. But if you look at how the US economy recovered, particularly after the war, because of the foundation that was put in place, it's a pretty remarkable story. And there's no reason we can't repeat that.
And I share your optimism. I do believe that the recovery is going to be fast because we do have a solution in place. We have a light at the end of the tunnel that is going to become available to hundreds of millions of Americans within the next several months. So there are a lot of reasons for optimism. But I would like to go back to your school, to Princeton. You have recently, together with your husband, George Lucas, made a contribution to Princeton University, and you established a new residential college that will be named for you, will be named after you. That is the first named for a Black woman. What does that mean to you? Going back to your school and looking at the opportunity to shape the future of Princeton University.
Well, first of all, just let me tell you a little bit about how it came to be. Princeton was talking to us about something else that didn't work out. They came back and they said, Mellody, we have a really unique idea. We want to replace the name of Wilson College, which is named after Woodrow Wilson, who has a checkered history at best on race relations and was known for his views, which do not reflect the school that we are today. We want to rename the school for you and the college for you. And we think that naming it after a contemporary person who is Black would be a profound statement. We've not been ones to just go and name things after ourselves. That's not something that I find to be important. But I thought that was important. And I have to say, when it happened, we've been working on it for over a year. So it wasn't a result of George Floyd's horrific murder or anything like that. It was not some kind of knee-jerk reaction. We've been on the case on this one since last summer. When it did happen, I have to say the notes that I got, probably thousands, were really just stunning to me. Very, very significant people in the Black community who said they burst into tears. And I went to my husband after that day and I walked in and I was choking back tears. And I said, George, you don't understand how important this is. I said, you all have buildings everywhere. We don't have this. And it really became, for me at that moment, something very, very meaningful. I did it, I think, for the right reasons, and I love Princeton. But I also, when I saw the reaction of peers, loved ones, family, friends, strangers, I realized how significant that statement was and how important role models are in our society. And everyone should be able to be represented, particularly in elite institutions like Princeton.
Well, thank you very much for that contribution. And I know how the Princeton community is excited about your contribution. I know that for a fact. But I would also like to now switch over to a few questions from our audience because there's so much interest in our conversation. So we had quite a few questions submitted ahead of time. So here is the first one. What advice would you give for minority women who are trying to start up small business in this country?
I think that's
in this
really
economy?
Great. Yeah, so for minority women trying to start a small business in this country, first of all, my hat's off to you. I didn't start Ariel, but I'm an entrepreneur. I could have started Ariel, and I have a founder's mentality. And I know how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. So first of all, you just know that I am rooting for you every single day. The second thing that I would say to you, and it's a really important but not gee whiz statement, and so I hope you'll take it in the most constructive way, figure out a way to distinguish yourself. And make sure you don't have a Me Too product, Me Too idea, that if you're going to do it differently, whatever it might be. It could be a grocery store, a hair salon, it could be a new technology company, a healthcare company, whatever it is. Try to create a new mold. And I think that augments your chances of success. The other thing I would tell you is that when John Rogers started Ariel, it's a great story. He went to family and friends, his family doctor, his family dentist, And he asked each of them to put $20,000 into the company. And it was into the fund that was called the Ariel Fund. He asked for $20,000 because back in 1983, that was a lot, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't their life savings. And if it didn't work out, they weren't going to go out of, they stopped speaking to him. And so when you think about raising money, I think people often think to go to someone and ask them for very big numbers, but getting it in small bites amongst lots of people diversifies your risk and also has a lot of people out there advocating for you, which I think is really great and smart. And lastly, I would say when you go to raise that money from family, friends, etc., raise more than you think you need. Because every entrepreneur runs out of money, I can tell you. So whatever you think the number is, increase it by 30 or 50%, because it will be more than you think. That is a universal truth.
It sounds like renovating your kitchen. It always costs more than you think it would.
But it's a powerful thing to be an entrepreneur. And the entrepreneurs, particularly the Black and brown entrepreneurs in this country, are the ones that are going to take us to the next level.
So the second question goes as follows. What is the most important outcome you expect to see with the improvement in financial literacy among economically marginalized communities?
The best outcome that we could have is that we would be secure in our retirement. So many Black and brown people, we work until we die. We don't have what is thought of as a traditional retirement. We don't even think of retirement in that way. We have surveyed African Americans about retirement versus white Americans, and we ask them, what are their plans? Black Americans say, start a business, consult, start a new career. White Americans say, spend time with grandchildren, spend time with family, travel. We literally have a different impression of what retirement is. And I think that's something that's super important. I always tell people that if you run out of money when you're old and poor, there is no retirement account, there is no retirement loan. And even Walmart won't take you when you're 95 years old and you need a job. And so it's a very, very, very serious thing to think about that retirement. And that's where I think financial literacy really pays off for society. Because it's one thing if I've done a good job of saving and investing and you've done a good job, but if the person sitting in the office or the cube next to us hasn't, they're our problem. And they will be a burden on society, which means higher taxes, more social programs, etc. So it's all in it's in all of our best interests for our country to be financially literate.
And the last question is from one of the members of our younger members in the audience. They are curious about what advice do you give to recent college graduates starting out their career paths?
So what I say to recent college graduates is, first and foremost, speak your truth. And understand truth does not have a capital T, it's a small t. Your truth is not necessarily someone else's truth. But I've seen so many people try to assimilate or fit in by holding their opinion. And I think I've gotten where I am today by being direct and hopefully constructive, which I think is very important, but having a point of view. And when you can have a point of view, it allows you to stand out. And when you stand out, you get picked. So if you're willing to have a point of view, I tell people all the time that before I go to a board meeting, I try to decide what is the unique, innovative thought or question I will ask in that meeting before I get there, so that I stand out. No me too questions. When I was at Princeton, I had a professor who would say, in our precept group, if you said, I want to reiterate what Mellody said, he'd say, you mean iterate again. And it was his way of telling me I did not have an original thought. I never reiterate anything in a board meeting. I want to go in with my own original thought. So I would tell that young person to speak their truth and really, really rack their brain to have original thoughts.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mellody. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. I really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all of the things that you do to create a better world for the rest of us when it comes to healthcare and all of your colleagues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again. You're very, very kind to say so. And my thanks to all of you for joining us. Ideas for Tomorrow will return in 2021 with interesting guests and informative conversations We'll keep you posted about upcoming speakers. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the week, and please be healthy and be safe. Thank you.